Welcome back to the shop, everyone. This week's video takes place in 2026, week 8, February 16th through 22nd. And I am back on to doing some electrical. And I got 47 in the shop with me briefly, so you'll see him kind of walking around a little bit, maybe jumping on my lap. That's my guy. So I think where I left off is I am re-crimping the clutch position sensor input wire because I cut it, because I cut all three wires, the sensor +5, the sensor ground, and the input, even though I only needed to split the ground and the +5. I did not need to cut the input, but I did, so I got to fix that. So after I crimp that back together, I will go ahead and shrink wrap that. And then, yeah, we are just going to start cleaning up some of the electrical, some of the wire, getting them into place, and start cleaning up the car afterwards, because we are going to take a bit of a break from electrical. We are going to get on to other fun things, as the title of the video would suggest. So as part of this cleanup, I'm going to go ahead and just cut all of the zip tie tails just to make the inside a little bit cleaner. I'm not gonna lie, looking at like the wiring here on the passenger side, just in the loom and that through panel stud that has the O2 sensor, this is looking really freaking good. I am pretty happy with how it's all looking right now. All right, now that we've got a ton of cleanup done, the bench is a little bit cleaned up, we can continue on. So what we're going to do is we're going to tape off the inside of the car. Now, when I first did the painting... No, what was I doing on the outside? I don't remember what I was doing. Might have been all the... I don't know, probably just all the cleaning, like all of the stripping the body. In any case, I had the interior, all the windows taped off. Like the doors, I had the windshield and I had the hatch all taped off. But when I started doing electrical, I, took the two doors and the windshield off. I took the windshield off when I installed the roof. But what I discovered is when I took all that masking off, the interior was covered with dirt. And that was because, when I was cleaning up after I'd stripped all the paint off, I used an air hose and I blew all the dirt underneath the car and everything. Well, that just came straight up through the trans tunnel because, 90 psi of air does not care about gravity. It is going to throw dirt and stuff absolutely everywhere, and it did. So this time I am pulling my head out of my ass. I am taping off all the holes in the floorboard to try and minimize the amount of dust. Now, it's not going to be perfect, so I'm just trying to minimize it as best I can. So taping up all the big holes. I'll actually jump underneath the car, tape some holes from the bottom side as well. I just want to do my best to keep, all the wiring and the cage and everything clean this time. Because, last time it took me a while to get it all cleaned off. Not the end of the world if I got to do it, but, I'd prefer not. So, again, I'm going to go ahead and do some backmasking on this. I'm not going to talk too much because I talked while I did the backmasking before, so enjoy. So another thing to keep in mind is now that I am spraying the entire car in this area of the quarter window where what we call the sail panels go, there's 6 mounting holes. So I'm taking a little bit of foam and I'm just pushing the foam into the mounting holes. That way when I prime the car, the mounting holes don't get primer through them and pass through into the interior, because that would cover, you know, the cage and other things that are in there, and I don't want overspray on the inside of the car. So just plugging holes best I can. There are a few holes that I'll let go, like there's the hole in the door for the door jamb, where the door lock pin. So I'm leaving that open. I don't think it's going to be that big a deal. I don't think I'm going to get that much overspray. And if I do, it's in an area that I don't really care about. And another thing is the tape that I used for the backmasking this time around was not the same 3M tape that I had the first time around, because I didn't have any. So that was just general like hardware store tape, and it just does not hold as well as the good 3M stuff. All right, so before I do the priming, what I want to do is mix up this glass, this Durabond here. This is long, I think this is like long fiberglass, and I'm going to use this between the roof and the body to fill in that gap. So I'm just going to put a little bit in there. Actually, what I'm doing right now is I'm filling all of the Cleco holes from when I put the roof on. That's what I'm doing right now. I actually want to prime the car before I fill the body gap. But filling all the holes where the Clecos were, I can totally do that now. So I'm just getting this all good and mixed up. As you can kind of see, when I first opened this can, it was kind of separated. So I want to make sure it's just mixed up as good as I can, just using these mixing sticks. And then I will put some of the Bondo on the, or I guess Duraglass on the mixing paper, put some hardener in it, and then just mix the two together with the Bondo, not squeegees, but the little yellow things there on the bottom of the screen. I can't think of the name of them. Get it all mixed together, and then I'll get all the holes filled in the roof. So this is one of those learning experiences where after you do this once, you realize that taking a little bit more time and care in this part of the process, like had I taken a little bit more care to not goop this on as much, to kind of clean it up a little bit more, I could have sanded down the 3M panel bond a little bit more. Had I done some of that stuff now and just kind of smooth the filler on a little bit cleaner, not gobbed it on as much, it would make the sanding process a lot smoother. So yeah, that's what I learned. You know, it's better to just do small amounts of the filler and then, you know, sand that down and go back and add more if you have to, instead of just gobbing it on. There's a few areas here where I just gobbed it on, and it kind of made it pretty tough to manage. So as I'm doing this a little bit more, I'm starting to get better. But yeah, just a big learning experience that, you know, I'm going through. So I kind of let that sit overnight. Might have been a couple of days because I had some other stuff going on. But yeah, so starting to sand this down, and it's taking quite a bit of effort. I don't remember what grit of sandpaper I have there. I might have 320, but I do end up finding some 100 grit, and that really cut through it and got it leveled out. And that's where I'd say, like, just learning that less filler is more in the long run. As long as you've got all your holes filled, try and level it out. It just makes everything easier in the long run. But there's nothing, I haven't burned through the roof or anything like that, so it's not like there's anything that can't be fixed. It's just takes more work to fix it. All right, now that I've got all of the initial filler kind of sanded down, it's time to start getting the body prepped for primer. So what I'm doing is I had some masking tape on the top of the roof, so I'm just pulling that off. I'm taking my long sanding block, and I'm using 220, I think. I probably could have gotten away with a more aggressive grit as well, but because this is carbon fiber, I didn't want to dig into it. I just want to scuff it a little bit. So yeah, using 220, and I'm just going to go ahead and give this a nice crosshatch sanding, just to get it scuffed down so that the paint will really adhere to it. Is this really needed for carbon fiber? I don't know, but I know that you would do this just for painting in general. Like, you want to give the surface a good scuff. And the reality is, I probably should have gone over all of the metal with like an 80 grit DA just to scuff it a bit more, because I stripped it all with like the the Roloc Scotch Brights and my 80 grit big sander. But I probably should have gone over the bare metal with an 80 grit DA just to give the primer a bit more bites. We'll see. Hopefully the paint doesn't just fly off as I start going down the road, but you never know. It might. So on the driver's side here, I'm putting the foam into those 6 sail panel holes because I hadn't done it on the driver's side yet. And then after that, now that I've got the roof scuffed, I'm going to wipe the car down with wax and degreaser. Just go, back to front, wipe the entire car down with this, and that's going to be the last step before I prime it. Oh, look at that. I lied again. Before I actually prime the car, I want to drill out all of these holes in the tabs. So I built some panels for the front end of the car so that I can, have it all enclosed instead of just having it open to the wheel wells. And when I built them, I only drilled these holes out to 1/8 inch so that I'd be able to hold them on with Clecos. Well, before I actually prime the car, I want to drill them out so that the nut certs that I will be installing can go in there and kind of sit nice and free. And that way, after I paint it all, the holes will be a little bit tighter, and then the nut certs should get a little bit more bite. But this is the perfect opportunity to go through and open these holes up as needed. Otherwise, if I do it after paint, then I'm gonna have to go back through, add a little touch of primer, a little touch of paint, and make it look good. Might as well just open up the holes and then paint them before I even prime. Just do a little bit of forethought here. And right, you can see on the firewall there's a few areas where rust is poking through. A few areas where that primer is all kind of dark brown. When I initially put on the rust inhibitor, I didn't really let it flash off long enough, and so there were some areas that were still wet. And when moisture gets trapped between the primer and the metal, rust develops and continues to develop because the moisture has nowhere to escape from, so it just continues to get worse and worse and worse. So I'm cleaning off those areas where the rust was starting, and then I'm going to just clean off a few more areas. If there's areas where there's no rust, I don't really think I need to do anything with it. That might prove to be a fatal mistake, and I may at some point in time have to come back in here and sandblast the entire engine bay and strip it all down and redo the whole thing from scratch. But I'm going to hope that I don't have to do that, so I'm just getting rid of some of the primer and some of the areas where I kind of thought that I might need to. So another thing I have to do, this passenger side fender has a lot of rust holes in it. So I'm going to take the time now before it's in primer to do my best to clean up some of the holes and clean up some of the rust. So just grinding it down as much as I can, and then I'll take my welder, I'll weld it back up as best I can, and then again I will grind it flat. Now what I really should have done is cut out a chunk of metal, just cut this out and then weld it in a new piece of metal. That would have been the right way to do this, instead of trying to, patch a ton of little holes. Problem is, I'm not that great at body work, so I didn't want to risk mangling all the body lines and just really messing this up more. So I'm doing what I can to do to fix it. So that's welding it up a little bit, knocking it down, and then I'll put some rust inhibitor over all the rest of it to hopefully stop any rust from developing. And then before I weld, I'm going to beat the inner lip, or roll the inner lip, because there was a little bit of rubbing on the tire. So I just want to beat the crap out of that inner lip and get it so that I just have that little, like, 1/4 inch more clearance. I also made a couple holes on the driver's side here when I was doing some of the body work. So I'm just quickly welding those holes up. I'll grind them down. And that's all it's needed. It wasn't a ton that was needed here. All right, so now that last little bit of welding and cleanup and cleaning the firewall and engine bay off is done, we can do some cleanup and then we can prep for paint. So, because I've been doing a bunch of sanding and grinding and stuff, you know, really blowing the car off a couple of times to get all of that dust and dirt to the front of the shop. And then finally the wax and degreaser to you know, for final prep. So that's what we're spraying on here. Yeah, it's just spraying it on the paper towel. I eventually spray it just directly on the metal and just wiping it all down, making sure it's all clean, and that's going to give us the best chance for the primer to adhere. It's the same thing that I did on the engine bay, and when you look at when I was taking the paint off there, it took a lot of effort to get the paint off, so I feel like I did decent prep and that this is gonna hopefully last the test of time and the paint job isn't gonna fly off my first time down the road, but that's a possibility. Yeah, this tape that I got, as I said, this is just cheap hardware store stuff, and it just doesn't stick as well as the 3M stuff does. So after I do the body work before I paint, I think I'm going to take all of this masking off and I'm going to put new masking on, because I did order and get some proper 3M tape in, because while I'm spraying the black or the red, definitely do not want the possibility of any of this stuff coming off. So we'll see when we get there. But well, I also feel like after all the sanding and stuff, there's going to be dust on this plastic. There's going to be primer on this plastic. So I probably want to remove it and start fresh when I paint color. But as I say, we'll see when we get there. I mean, it doesn't take long to tape it off. It's like an hour to do the whole car, so it's really not a big deal. Doing a pile more cleanup. In this video, I just left the cleanup in there. You know, sometimes, as I've said before, sometimes I leave cleanup stuff in here. Sometimes I take it out. All depends on how I'm feeling that day. Sometimes it's really nice to just clean up the shop, no camera, just, you know, jam out with some music and do my thing and not have to worry about it. Also makes editing easier because, as you can see, I'm like constantly on and off camera. So as I'm editing, I have to, you know, be like, oh, I'm walking off camera, you know, do a split. Okay, I'm walking back into frame, do another split, delete the middle. So it takes a lot of time to do the editing when I'm constantly on and off camera. That's actually why I like a lot of the wide, super wide shots, because I can walk around the shop, be like, oh, I went over to get tools, I did this, and I'm still on camera, so I don't have to cut that stuff out. But I also like having like up close of the work that I'm doing, depending on what I'm doing, right? When I'm painting, I mean, I can do the far back shots and you see exactly what's happening, and you actually maybe not necessarily get a better picture, but it's more visually representative of what's happening, and you kind of see the whole thing as it's happening. So I like that. And also when I'm painting, I don't want to have to worry about moving the camera around or knocking the camera into the car. So while I'm painting, those shots will be wide. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead, get my epoxy primer mixed up, and then I'm going to lay a coat on. So first coat's done, so got to clean up the gun, and then we'll let that dry for at least 24 hours before I start doing anything with it. What I learned is I definitely could have laid this paint down a little bit thicker. The first time I start sanding, I realized I burned through it real quick. But hey, that's okay. I'm learning as I go. I'll get better, and you know, if it's not perfect, that's okay. As I say, as long as it doesn't fly off the car first time going down the road, that's really all I care about. And, you know, like the paint on my diff, it lasted, you know, all season last year. There were some issues where I dropped like my headers or my exhaust on it, and so it chipped it, but whatever, that's fine. So I've got a fair amount of confidence in the work that I'm doing. I'm not going for perfect. I'm going for good enough. This is not going to be like a show car quality, you know, 700 hours in paint and body work. This is going to be, you know, down and dirty street strip car. It's going to look good. The metal flake's going to pop and look really nice, I hope. And that's the goal for this, is not perfect, but good. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting some, what is that? That's, can't think of the name of it now. Anyways, it's a powder that goes on over top of the paint, and as you start sanding, what'll happen is all of the low spots won't get sanded, only the high spots will, so you know where you need to add some filler. Guide coat, that's what it's called. So you can kind of not really see it all that well, but it's all sanding kind of evenly-ish, so it's not really good. But, you know, I'm burning through the paint in a lot of areas, and that's why I'm like, I probably didn't put it on thick enough. Now I know. Slow it down a bit, open the fan out a little bit, I can throw some more. So you can kind of see there as I'm sanding, there's some areas where the guide coat is still super, super prominent. That's going to be because those are low spots. And you can actually see there's a couple of spots that are super shiny, and that's because I already burned through it. So that's a high spot. Now, for these back quarters, this 18-inch block really isn't great because there's a lot of curves on this back quarter. And, you know, the 18-inch block is good for long, flat areas, not these small areas. So it wasn't a great tool to use up on the sail panel area where I'm at now. Yeah, it's perfect for that because it encompasses the whole thing. That whole area is flat. There's not a lot of curves in there. So, you know, just learning and figuring this out as I go. Yeah, I'm just going to continue on with this. And what I also realized is it's better to, after the primer is on, maybe scuff it a little bit, but in reality, put the Bondo on before you start. Like if you know you need Bondo, put it on before you do any sanding. Because by putting it on before I do any sanding, then I have a better chance of sanding the filler or the Bondo smooth with the paint, and then all the primer is still there and everything else. Whereas right now, by sanding it first, if I burn through, I can't just add, I don't want to add Bondo over exposed metal. I want to add Bondo over primer. So I got to respray this before I put any filler on this quarter anyways. So yeah, just things I'm learning as I go. And hey, am I doing this the right way? I don't know. You know, this is the extent of my experience in paint and body work, is what you're seeing right now. Still haven't learned my lesson yet. I'm sanding down this cowl panel without putting any filler on it, so I'm learning there's some low spots, some high spots. That's okay. As you know, this is just a learning experience. All right, learned my lesson, putting filler down before I sand anything. So I'm gonna throw some filler on, I think, the firewall now and the passenger side or driver's side rear quarter. Because I know I need filler on the rear quarter. It looks like a golf ball. It's all dimpled and shit. And I know the firewall is all over the place too. That's another, again, I kind of learned after I did this rear the first time that it's best to start thin on the filler and then work your way up, just doing small batches. I put a ton on here and all over the place, and, I ended up sanding most of it off, so it's better to just, go slow and build up, and if you got to do it a few times, that's probably better than just going thick and having to sand most of it off and then not working out. So now that I have the car primed, I'm just going to fill in some of the body gaps between the roof and the car. And again, it's one of those things where I probably just gobbed way too much on here because, when I get to it, I have to sand it down way more than I would like. So in the future, I will try to be a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit more, have a little bit more finesse as I'm doing the filler work. So the next day or a couple days later or whenever I had time, start sanding this down. And it's, taking a lot of effort to sand down because it's, filler. But just working my way through this, as I say, just trying to figure this out. This is probably the wrong block for this. This block is an 18-inch block, and, there isn't an 18-inch chunk on this quarter that's fully straight. So there's lots of curves on here. So this is probably the wrong block and not helping me out at all. it's not perfect yet. I mean, it'll never be perfect, but it's not even good yet, but I've made progress. So I still got a lot of work to do in here, but so far I'm pretty happy with how this is turning out, because it's, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I have my vision, and I know if I just, put some time into it, I can execute and it'll be good in the end. So at this point, I'm sanding. I'm using the air chuck to blow off some of the dust and kind of clean off the paper. And I use it on the car, and I blow a chunk of the filler off, and I'm like, fuck. Because that took filler and primer, and I'm kind of like, shit. That means the primer didn't stick. So I'm trying to chip it away and see if, any of the other primer just kind of pops off. Because, if the primer just pops off, that's not really a good thing. And that's why I joke. I'm like, I hope this paint job doesn't just like fly off as I'm going down the road. But, I have a feeling that the rest of it is solid enough that, once I prime and once I clear it, as long as the clear is good and solid, it'll hold it all together, because I think most of the primer has stuck pretty well. But there's a couple of areas where I blow on it and, primer and filler come off. So I'm like, yeah. But it is what it is. We're moving forward. So as I start sanding on the firewall, there's a lot of filler on there. It's fairly thick. You know, nothing on this firewall is straight, and I'm just having a rough go of it because I put, like, there's some areas where I just put way too much filler in, and there's big ridges. As I say, none of it's flat, so I'm switching up paper a lot, and then I realized, I'm like, all right, I need to remove a lot of this filler in a little bit of amount of time, and using the block is not, you know, really good. I mean, it's kind of working, but it's taking a lot of effort. I'm having to put a lot of pressure into this. So in a second here, I'm going to swap out for my electric sander with 120 grit sandpaper just to knock the majority of this down. And there I tried to put the new paper on the old paper because I'm an idiot. But yeah, so just using this, it really knocks it down a little bit quicker. And it'll get to a point where I can be kind of at a happy place with it, where it's, you know, sanded down quite a bit. I'll see the high spots, as you can see, like anywhere that's shiny right now, that is a high spot compared to the rest of the firewall because it's getting all the paint removed first, whereas when I was blocking, the low spots will keep all the Bondo. So I'm just trying to knock down the majority of this Bondo. I will re-prime the firewall after the first layer of Bondo. I'll reapply Bondo, and then I will repeat this process, hopefully no more than 3 times, and then I'll have the firewall pretty flat, and it will hopefully be ready for a final coat of primer at that point. Does layering primer, then Bondo, then primer, then Bondo, then primer, then Bondo gonna hurt this at all? I don't know. I hope it doesn't. I really hope it doesn't, but it might. Obviously, there is a lot of high spots and a lot of low spots on this firewall, but I've got the majority of the filler sanded down to a reasonable level. And with that, that is all the time that we have for this week. So as always, if you've stuck around this long, I'd like to thank you for viewing. We'll see you in the next one.